Hey everyone! Today we're uncovering the interesting story of the Ostrogoths, an eastern branch of the Gothic tribes, a group of Germanic people who once held great power in history. The Ostrogoths originated around the Black Sea, and their name is often thought to mean Eastern Goths. But here's something interesting. The term actually translates to something like Goths glorified by the rising sun. It's a poetic title coined by the Roman writer Cassiodorus, who also introduced the term Visigoth to differentiate between the two major Gothic groups. In reality, the Ostrogoths didn't see themselves as just Eastern Goths, and the Visigoths didn't initially call themselves Western Goths either. These labels came much later, largely thanks to Roman attempts to categorize them. The Goths as a whole were first mentioned living near the Black Sea, where they constantly raided Roman territories, becoming a relentless thorn in the side of the empire. Things shifted dramatically when the Huns arrived in 375 CE, sweeping through Gothic lands with overwhelming force. Some Goths fled westward, seeking protection from Rome, and these became known as the Visigoths. The ones who stayed behind, enduring Hunnic rule while maintaining some autonomy, were later identified as the Ostrogoths. After the death of the infamous Hun leader Attila in 453 CE, the Ostrogoths seized the opportunity to break free from Hunnic control. They declared their independence and began carving out their own path in history. Their leader Theodoric the Great would later guide them to settle in Italy, establishing the Ostrogothic Empire. But before all that, the Ostrogoths were a resilient people who adapted to centuries of upheaval and shifting alliances. The origins of the Goths themselves are a bit of a mystery. Some historians suggest they came from around Gdansk, Poland, before migrating to places like Germany and Hungary. But not everyone agrees on this. The lack of a written history from the Goths' early days makes things tricky, leaving us to rely on accounts from Roman historians and whatever archaeological evidence has been uncovered. And even that can be debated. For example, the discovery of thousands of Gothic tombs in Poland, known as the wheelbark culture, is often pointed to as evidence of their origins. But some scholars argue that these tombs might represent a Gothic settlement after they had already moved from an earlier homeland. It's a puzzle where every piece comes with its own set of questions. One thing's for sure: the Goths weren't a single unified ethnic group from start to finish. Instead, they were more like a coalition of people with shared goals and interests. As they migrated, they interacted with other tribes, intermarried, and adopted new customs, blending their identity with others. By the time they entered Roman history, the Goths were probably a mix of different peoples bound together by common cause, rather than a strictly defined ethnic group. Their history with Rome began in the 3rd century, with their first recorded attack on Roman territory in 238 CE. From then on, the Goths alternated between being Rome's enemies and its allies, sometimes fighting against the empire and other times serving as mercenaries. The Visigoths were the group that most often tangled with Rome, while the Ostrogoths remained further east, eventually falling under the shadow of the Huns. After the death of Attila, the Ostrogoths found themselves at a turning point. They teamed up with another Germanic tribe, the Gepids, under the leadership of Ardaric. Together, they defeated Attila's sons in the Battle of Nidau in 454 CE, putting an end to Hunnic dominance in the region. This victory allowed the Ostrogoths to settle in Pannonia, a region in modern-day Hungary. Their leaders during this time, kings like Valamir, Widomir, and Theodomir, kept the Ostrogoths moving forward. Valamir, for example, continued the Hunnic tradition of raiding Roman lands and demanded protection money from the Eastern Roman Emperor Leo I. After Valamir's death, Theodomir took over, and his son Theodoric became a central figure in Gothic history. Young Theodoric was even sent to Constantinople as a hostage to ensure peace with Rome, where he received an education in Roman culture and values. And in 474 CE, Theodoric became king of the Ostrogoths. He was a skilled warrior, a shrewd leader, and highly popular, not just among his people but even within the Byzantine Empire. Emperor Zeno saw Theodoric as both a valuable ally and a potential threat. Theodoric was determined to secure land for his people, and Zeno, unwilling to provide it outright, devised a plan to solve two problems at once. He sent Theodoric to Italy to deal with King Odoacer, a ruler who had been a persistent thorn in Zeno's side. Between 488 and 493 CE, Theodoric led a campaign into Italy, supported by the Byzantine Empire. After a series of battles, Theodoric defeated Odoacer, but instead of immediately consolidating power, he pretended to negotiate peace. This truce was a ruse. Theodoric assassinated Odoacer during a banquet, taking control of Italy and establishing the Ostrogothic Empire in 493 CE. This empire stretched across Italy, parts of modern-day France, Spain, and even Sicily. Under Theodoric, the Ostrogothic Empire thrived. He embraced Roman culture, art, and literature, ensuring the legacy of the Roman Empire lived on in his rule. Though his campaign had been funded by the Byzantine Empire, Theodoric governed independently, maintaining peaceful relations with Byzantium. He enforced religious tolerance, creating harmony between his predominantly Arian Christian Ostrogoths and the Nicene Christians of Italy. He also restored the war-torn lands, repairing cities, replanting forests, and improving agricultural systems to ensure prosperity for his subjects. Theodoric treated all his people equally under the law, and implemented a fair taxation system. His court became a hub of education and philosophy, attracting brilliant minds like Boethius, whose famous work, The Consolation of Philosophy, was penned during this era. Theodoric also commissioned his scribe Cassiodorus to write the history of the Goths, helping to legitimize his rule by linking it to a grand past. But as great as Theodoric was, his empire couldn't sustain itself after his death in 526 CE. His daughter, Amalasuntha, took over as regent for her young son, Athalaric. She shared her father's vision and worked to maintain stability by promoting Roman values and continuing his policies. However, after Athalaric's death in 534 CE, she faced challenges in securing her position as queen. Seeking support, she reached out to the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I, but when no timely response came, she made a fateful decision. She invited her cousin, Theodahad, to rule alongside her. Unfortunately, Theodahad betrayed her. Driven by his own ambition, he had Amalasuntha assassinated in 535 CE, setting off a chain of events that plunged the Ostrogothic Empire into chaos. Her son-in-law, Witiges, avenged her by killing Theodahad and claiming the throne in 536 CE. But his reign would do little to stabilize the fractured kingdom. Witiges proved to be an ineffective king. Corruption ran rampant in his government, with tax officials pocketing funds instead of using them to support the empire. Soldiers were underpaid, pensions were neglected, and unemployment soared. The growing discontent among the Ostrogoths didn't go unnoticed by Justinian I. Frustrated with the instability in Italy, he sent his brilliant general Flavius Belisarius to bring the region under Byzantine control. Belisarius wasted no time. In 535 CE, he captured Sicily, then moved on to Naples and Rome by 536 CE. By 540 CE, he had taken Ravenna and captured Witiges. Justinian offered the defeated Ostrogoths terms that seemed generous at first. They could keep an independent kingdom in Italy and surrender only half of their treasury. But Justinian had no intention of honoring these promises. The Ostrogoths were wary of Justinian's motives, but trusted Belisarius, who had treated them with fairness during his campaigns. When the Gothic nobility suggested crowning Belisarius as their king, he played along, knowing it was a strategic move to secure their surrender. Once the Goths laid down their arms, Belisarius betrayed the plan, arrested the conspirators, and claimed the Ostrogothic lands and treasury in the name of Justinian. Despite his loyalty, Justinian grew suspicious of Belisarius' growing popularity. Concerned about his influence, Justinian recalled him to lead another campaign against the Persians, and left a Byzantine official to govern Italy. But the Ostrogoths weren't ready to give up their independence. Dissatisfied with the Byzantine leadership, they elevated Ereric as their new king in 541 CE. However, Ereric proved weak and self-serving, and his reign was short-lived. He was assassinated the same year. Desperate for a leader who could restore their glory, the Ostrogoths turned to a military commander named Totila, a bold and nationalist figure. And when Totila took power in 541 CE, he was determined to lead the Ostrogoths into a new era of stability and independence. Unlike the squabbling, ineffective rulers who came before him, Totila wasn't interested in negotiating with the Byzantine Empire or playing politics with Rome. His vision was simple: to rule his people with strength and justice, much like Theodoric the Great had done before him. But Justinian I, the Eastern Roman Emperor, had no intention of letting that happen. In 542 CE, Justinian sent a Byzantine army, commanded by 11 generals, to confront Totila at Verona. However, this was no disciplined united force. These generals were more concerned about who would claim the spoils of war than focusing on the task at hand. Their bickering gave Totila the time he needed to outmaneuver them. Using brilliant tactics, he arranged his forces for a pincer attack that utterly crushed the Byzantines, leaving their army in ruins. This victory didn't just secure Verona, it also cemented Totila's reputation as a masterful leader and strategist. As word of his victory spread, Totila's army grew. Many flocked to his side, drawn by his chivalry in battle, and his reputation for treating defeated foes with mercy. His growing forces allowed him to launch a sweeping campaign of conquest, bringing nearly all of Italy under his control. By the time he captured Naples in 543 CE, even Justinian's own barbarian auxiliaries had begun deserting to join Totila. By 545 CE, Totila had his sights set on the jewel of Italy, Rome. Although no longer the powerful empire it once was, Rome still held immense symbolic value, especially for the Byzantines. Totila besieged the city and eventually took it. Recognizing the leverage this gave him, he made a bold offer to Justinian. Either the Byzantines could end the war and leave him to rule in peace, or he would destroy Rome and execute its senators, erasing one of the greatest symbols of Roman civilization. But then came a turning point. Totila received a letter from Belisarius, the Byzantine general who had previously fought against him. Whether acting on his own or under Justinian's orders, Belisarius urged Totila to reconsider. He warned that Justinian would never agree to let him rule Italy, and that destroying Rome would ruin Totila's legacy forever. Up to this point, Totila was admired even by his enemies for his fairness and mercy. If he destroyed Rome, Belisarius argued, he would be remembered not as a noble leader, but as the man who obliterated the eternal city. Totila made the fateful decision to listen. He left Rome intact, sparing its people and its heritage. But this proved to be his first major mistake. Belisarius quickly moved in, reoccupied the city, and fortified its defenses, ensuring it would be much harder for Totila to retake it. The two leaders clashed multiple times after this, but Totila's momentum began to falter. Eventually, Belisarius was recalled, and Justinian replaced him with Narses, a general who, while less refined than Belisarius, was a capable and relentless commander. The final blow came at the Battle of Taginae in 552 CE, where Totila was killed. Without their charismatic leader, the Ostrogothic resistance crumbled. The remaining forces were defeated at the Battle of Mons Lectarius in 553 CE, and Italy fell back under Byzantine control. Even after Totila's death, his legacy lingered. His son, backed by Frankish allies, attempted to continue the fight, but it was a losing battle. By 562 CE, the Ostrogoths as a distinct political entity had disappeared. Many of them migrated into regions like France and Germany, while others stayed behind, blending into the changing fabric of Italy. The devastation of nearly 2 decades of war left Italy a shadow of its former self. Cities were depopulated, and vast stretches of land lay in ruin. This opened the door for a new wave of invaders. In 568 CE, the Lombards, a Germanic tribe led by King Alboin, entered northern Italy. Interestingly, the Lombards had previously fought alongside the Byzantines against Totila, but now they arrived as conquerors. The remaining Ostrogoths allied with the Lombards, perhaps seeing them as a chance to rebuild the war-ravaged land. Over the next 2 centuries, the Lombards established their kingdom in Italy, bringing a sense of stability to the region. Their culture gradually merged with the surviving Roman and Ostrogothic traditions, laying the foundation for what would become the medieval Italian identity. The Ostrogoths, once a proud and powerful people, had faded from history, but their influence lived on through the legacy of leaders like Theodoric and Totila,